And in 3, 2, 1.
You are now listening to the Lapsed Graps podcast.
Hello and welcome to the first ever episode 15 of Lapsed Graps, a podcast where I, Sam, a person who watches pro wrestling, sit down with my friend
Jam, who doesn't?
and we discuss the wacky week that was in professional wrestling. This week is our Wrestle Kingdom Spectacular with special guest host Jesse Velasquez, a contributor at dailyddt.com. How you doing, Jesse?
Sam Jam, that rhymes. Thank you so much for having me on. Truly appreciate it. I'm doing really well. Thanks.
Good to hear, man. Good to hear. So, just to give a little bit of background, what was your introduction to New Japan? Because I know for me personally, Alpha versus Omega was the first, like, oh, I have to sit down, I have to watch this match, which was Wrestle Kingdom 12. So, it's been about 3 years that I've been, like, really all in on this company and just seeing everything that they put out. What's your story?
I am in the identical boat as you when it comes to following from a long-term storytelling standpoint. Wrestle Kingdom 12 was it, and obviously I think Chris Jericho was probably the person that brought you to it. I'd heard a lot about Okada and Omega from the prior Wrestle Kingdom, so I think once that kind of hit the interwebs, I'm curious. I've been a fan for a very long time, so I am familiar with the names like Masachono, Antonio Inoki, Shinya Hashimoto, Legends of the Past. Vader I know was there for a long time and dominant as a gaijin, but truly invested the last 3 years, and it's one of the best decisions I've ever made. New Japan as a whole, I feel, is the best company in wrestling worldwide.
Oh, absolutely. And it's one of those things where it has a really indie feel, at least to Western audiences, because they really don't do the weekly stuff. They don't come on and go, "Oh, here's 14 hours of content every 7 days that you have to keep up with to understand the things." Obviously, January is a different story because we've got Wrestle Kingdom and New Year's Dash, and that's almost 20 hours of wrestling right there across two shows. But like normally you've got your big show in the summer, your big show in January for Wrestle Kingdom, and then little shows interspersed there with the big tournaments obviously in the fall and spring. So it's a much more concise and condensed and easily digestible package, at least from this end. I know once you're over on the eastern side of the world and you've got New Japan running their weekly stuff and Stardom and DDT Pro and all of those other companies that run the similar schedule, it can be really intense. But it's definitely nice having that company that has world-class wrestling but doesn't expect you to give 20 hours a week to follow what it's doing.
So true. I think the only thing from a Western standpoint, and I know people from the other end of the world they won't sympathize with you whatsoever, is the lack of sleep that us as Americans, North Americans as a whole, don't get for that 2-day period, which is now 3. So I'm in the central time zone. I know, Jam, you are as well, so say I'm not familiar with you are, but having to wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning on a Monday is just not my cup of tea, something I don't do very often, but it's become tradition since Wrestle Kingdom 12, and it's I love it, absolutely love it. Make an event out of it, and yeah, here we are.
But before we get into Wrestle Kingdom of it all, we do have to go over some pretty sad news. Now, it's actually been over 2 weeks now since this was announced as of the time of recording. But John Huber, known in AEW as Brody Lee, obviously a WWE legend as well, passed away due to a non-COVID related lung illness. Wrestling Twitter wasted no time putting their collective foot in their mouth around this. There were COVID conspiracies running wild, usually around like the fringe accounts that everyone knows is going to pipe up and say some dumb shit. This got interesting because Bruce Mitchell ended up posting a almost 1,000-word op-ed that he tried to pass off as an article on his site about how he thought it was gross that AEW was lying about it not being COVID related when it's clearly COVID related, which led to his wife having to come out of the woodwork while grieving and explain explicitly that it wasn't COVID related and he needs to keep her husband's name out of his mouth. And it ended up with the article being pulled, and I believe Bruce Mitchell has taken a step back from the website at this point. I know he's definitely deactivated his Twitter. So yeah, it went from really sad to really, really confusing to just disgusting over the course of about a 24-hour period there. Do either of you guys have any kind of thought on that?
Yeah, I know a little bit. Like the Brody Lee news in itself is just sad self, just because not only because he was always fun to watch, but just hearing about just his impacts backstage, like beyond what we even knew. Like he touched everybody's lives in different ways. He was one of the better guys to run into. Always had positive, nice things to say, and he was just a great presence backstage. So it's sad to lose him. Like I haven't watched like any wrestling since I left ADT, but in Brody's passing, I ended up hunting down a few of his matches, and like you really get to see just like how I put this, just how far his influence in wrestling stretches. Like I realized that he had matches with Abyss, he did stuff in Chikara, he worked with Cesaro on the Indies, and when you see like just how far he's stretched out, and then he finally gets his time to shine in the sun, in the spotlight in AEW as TV champion, and to see it come down so fast, so tragically, it's just so sad. Now on the Bruce Mitchell thing, I kind of missed that a little bit. I saw like 50-50. I saw people dunking on him, and then I saw that he was actually fired from PW Torch. I didn't know the actual contents of the article. That's really like, it's like, like I don't get why. At the end of the day, like I don't get why people like Bruce Mitchell or just anyone would be out there searching for conspiracy theories or why he died. Like at the end of the day, a man died. At the end of the day, a child is without his father, wife without her husband, and it's just at the end of the day, it's just really sad stuff. And no matter how you try to conspiracy your way into it, and it's just a tragic situation.
The one thing that I'd heard a lot about Brody Lee and the comments were coming forward over and over again were how much of a family man he was, and that like his kids were top priorities. Family was top priority. Wrestling wasn't even 1B. It was number 2. Just something to supplement his life, obviously to provide for his family, which obviously he's made a fantastic career out of. But Jim Ross earlier or today was quoted as saying that Brody or John Huber was one of 2 men that every single person that he ever talked to had one that didn't have a negative thing to say about, which the other one was being, ironically, someone who as well died in a tragic accident with his own heart. So to be kind of mentioned that breath as like big time family man, locker room morale high, stand-up person, that is tremendous. And as for Bruce Mitchell, I heard the exact same thing that you guys did. I read the article, but honestly, I'm pretty glad I've forgotten most of it. So the context, I really am not horribly familiar with. I just know that it was way too soon to even think of that stuff. And number 2, extremely out of line, very irresponsible. So Wade Keller and the PW Torch team did the right thing by letting Bruce go. You don't see it often. If somebody passes away, like you'll see like a whole bunch of different promotions rally around it and say how much this person meant to them. You'd see Big E come out there, Cesaro, as you mentioned, Claudio. Everyone in the WWE locker room was very sad and in mourning, as they should be, for their fallen brother. And a lot of the same stories that were kept coming out, like I said earlier, were about him just being a family man, him being back there, and him being a genuinely good human being. So it's really, really unfortunate that we lost him so early in life at the age of 41.
Absolutely. And it's just one last thing, and then we will move on. It is so telling to what a good guy he was that a week, almost 2 weeks now since his passing, and you're still getting wrestlers coming out with these stories. Anna Jay is still coming out with stories every day. It seems like in wrestling Twitter, and maybe this is just Twitter all around, you find out that someone passed away, you say, "Oh man, that sucks. I'm so sad," and then it's like, "Oh, shiny," and you're on to the next thing. That doesn't seem to be the case here, and I think that speaks volumes to the kind of guy he was in the locker room, in front of the fans, and at home, that you can't stop these guys from continuing to share incredibly funny stories, incredibly heart-touching stories. But there was a segment on Talking Smack where following, I think he won the belt on Friday, Big E got a moment to kind of give a promo about his win, and he dedicated it to John Huber, and he talked about what an amazing guy that he was, and what a friend he was, and how he had such a deep impact on his life. And it's so heart-wrenching and sad to see someone who had this ability to touch people's lives and to be a leader and to, bring these younger people up with him just by virtue of being on screen fade away.
Very well said. Yeah, I know that those two were extremely close. I really follow along Andreas Hale and Kel Densby's Corner podcast, which is fantastic. And I guess Andreas got really close to Brody because they were huge mixed martial arts fans, and Biggie kind of got them together and they started exchanging DMs. So I believe it was the Khabib fight, mid to late October, where Andreas sent a text out there and said, Hey Brody, what do you think of the fight? He goes, I'm down and out right now. I'm not feeling well. I'll get back to you. And that was the last of it. So it's pretty unfortunate timing with that. Yeah. Brody will be most definitely remembered in a positive light with the wrestling community. I'm sure Jambi feel the exact same way.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And like one more thing to piggyback off that, like he definitely had a positive impact on the industry and everybody he touched. And it's amazing to think that in regards to just knowing that he worked everywhere you can imagine, WWE, Ring of Honor, like every indie place you can imagine, like everywhere he went, not a bad word was said about him. Everybody has a positive story about him. That really, to me, in the however many years he wrestled, that really speaks to the strong, positive character that Brody Lee was. In and out the ring, just a class act. He will be missed.
Absolutely. Moving on to some lighter news. It was announced during a GCW event that they will be holding a 24-hour live stream of wrestling called Fight Forever, which is a direct middle finger to that company up in New York, which I love. I am so happy that these guys are doing this. The event directly benefits indie promotions and performers that have been affected by the COVID pandemic. The event, which begins on January 29th and will go through January 30th, is streaming free on their YouTube channel. So it's all being done through donations and corporate sponsorship. I believe Orange Crush the soda is a name sponsor on the event, which is wild. This is a very cool way for Joey Janela to use his influence on the indie scene and the influence garnered him in mainstream wrestling with AEW to really double down and do something incredible for the community in a time when they're really hurting.
Yeah, props to Joey Janela for that. That's a really creative idea, and more importantly, just really beneficial. Like, I'm sure a lot of wrestlers, especially the indie wrestlers who really needed to work that date per date appearance type deal, were really hit really hard with COVID. So by doing this basically big extravaganza event to help support those wrestlers, that goes back to what we were talking about with class acts. That's really class act behavior. So shout out to him for that. I hope it does really well.
I didn't really know that much about Joey Janela when it comes to like just being a good humanitarian. You see the other side, I suppose. And of course, maybe that's probably his persona, being risen to the forefront. So I'm very, very happy that he's done this. And like you said, it was kind of a middle finger to the WWE. And yeah, I'm actually really looking forward to it. I'm assuming, Sam, that there's going to be a whole bunch of links for people to donate on their YouTube. Is that correct?
There hasn't been a ton of information released on that. I would assume as much that there's going to be links there, and then I believe for international audiences, it's streaming live through Fight TV, so there would be links there as well. But yeah, January 29th at 8 p.m. it's starting, and it's running all the way through January 30th at 8 p.m. and it's 24 hours straight of wrestling matches. So there's a lot of people right now on Twitter vying to get their name called and get their shot, and this is going to be a huge stage because GCW, especially in the last 12 months, has really kind of taken that place of Chikara as the indie. Like you go there to get noticed by the big companies. Obviously, it helps that one of the guys at the big companies is a main owner and promoter of that company, but this is the place you go to get notice to get up onto that next stage in this 24-hour event, on top of just benefiting indie wrestling as a whole, is going to do so much to further the careers of so many talented young men and women that just haven't had that opportunity yet. And one last piece of news before we get into everything. Because this is an all Wrestle Kingdom show, it is important to mention that the Good Brothers made their debut on AEW on Wednesday night. They showed up in the ring after Kenny Omega beat Phoenix to retain his world title. The Young Bucks came out. The Good Brothers were there. Kenny Omega was there. They all two sweeted in the middle of the ring. That's the only reason this is coming up with the Wrestle Kingdom episode. The Good Brothers have basically declared their intention to return to Japan once it's safe to do so. They want to go back. Japan wants them back. And now that you're kind of tying these knots in with Impact and AEW, there seems to be a clear path for the, Kenny Omegas, the, Nick and Matt Jacksons to kind of make that trek over. Interestingly enough, Cody Rhodes and Hangman Page were not present for that too sweet in the ring. Obviously, Hangman and the Bucks have kind of had their falling out. Hangman and Cody don't get along right now, or Hangman and Kenny don't get along right now. Cody, it seems like, is still on the up and up with the guys, so I'm not sure if that's a storyline thing or he was just, producing the episode and wasn't able to get out there. But it seems so deliberate to leave him out of the ring if he is still, an active member of, Bullet Club America or whatever they're going to end up calling it, to leave him out of that.
That's really interesting because, like you said, like there'd be a no-brainer to be in the ring with them. But the only thing I can think is that maybe if this is like forming like a Bullet Club America thing and knowing how Bullet Club has run rough shots over New Japan storylines and Ring of Honor storyline, maybe they could create a storyline where Cody's like, I'm not letting you run rough shot over my company, so I'm going to lead that forefront. And that could be an interesting storyline. But what I think is really interesting that kind of piqued my interest right now is that, like, usually when you see like inter-brand feuds like this, go back to WWF versus the Alliance days or any NXT versus Raw and SmackDown thing, Impact versus an indie or anything like that, it's usually the brands facing off against each other. But from the sounds of it so far, like, we've seen these brands work together more than anything. Like, you got Kenny Omega working with Gallows and Anderson, and I'm not sure if Hard to Kill has happened yet, but I remember you telling me that they're going to have the 6-man tag team match at the pay-per-view. So the fact that they're doing more collaborating so far than feuding, that's really interesting to me. Either they're kind of teasing the feuding, not into the Bullet Club, but as far as putting those AEW versus Impact matches, they're teasing that into like a further storyline, or they're playing something different with the interbrand type of feud thing. And I think that's really cool.
One thing I noticed with New Japan and with their expansion in the United States, I know they have the dojo. I cannot recall which side. Is it in Florida? Because I know there was one in California. There might be one in Florida as well.
It's in Los Angeles. Is the only dojo they have in the U.S. that I'm aware of. They may be establishing one in Florida, but to my knowledge, the only established dojo right now with New Japan personnel training out of it is in California.
Because I know during the pandemic, when New Japan came back, there started to be a lot of infusion with the New Japan strong style shows with like Rocky Romero and Kenta, because he was living here as well. I'm not sure if Jay White was on the show. I know Jeff Cobb, David Finlay. There's a lot of names there, but just to see, and then also having the Super J Cup, which we're going to talk about probably the first match on the Wrestle Kingdom with the winner of the Super J Cup versus the winner of the Best of Super Juniors. You now have all of this talent that they've brought in the last couple of years. They put them in the New Japan on the U.S. side of things in the strong style. So like Carl Fredericks, all the graduates from the dojo, and now you can kind of intertwine things and create more matchups down the road. And I know they haven't really voiced that there's a direct correlation with like Impact and New Japan with a working relationship. I know Ring of Honor had one for a long time. It's still there, but slowly it's kind of starting to disappear. You're not seeing as much talent on, but like the Motor City Machine Guns, they are in the main event with Rich Swann against Kenny Omega and Gallows and Anderson. So Chris Sabin was in the Best of Super Juniors back in 2018, not that long ago. You said ACH, same thing, and I know that he has been popping up recently on some indie shows. So I think it's a really exciting time that we're going to see a lot of collaborations, and we're going to start to see old territorial days potentially, as opposed to like what it became when Vince McMahon took over the WWF and really tried to make it just a national entity. I think it's more exciting when everything's territorial and you can have guys from different promotions like traveling all over the world for like 3 months at a time, having a feud, then going back home, and vice versa. Kind of just a talent share that's going to be beneficial for everyone, and us as wrestling fans are really going to reap the benefits.
Absolutely, and that's definitely going to come into play when the U.S. and U.K. kind of branded television gets started, which they allude to during Wrestle Kingdom's nights 1 and 2. That they're very close to working out a. I don't think they announced if it was terrestrial or cable deal, so you might have to have one of those like stadium sports packages to see it, but it'll be on TV, and that's going to be really, really cool, and just extend that market share to Japanese wrestling and New Japan itself even more so, and that's going to be a lot of fun. All right, well, we've dilly-dallied enough. Let's get into Wrestle Kingdom 15 Night 1. So the show opened like it usually does with their version of like a scramble match, a Royal Rumble, if you would. This one is for the opportunity to challenge to King of Pro Wrestling 2021, that kind of title match on night 2. The final four in that match were Chase Owens, Bushi, Bad Luck Fale, and the current holder of the King of Pro Wrestling, Toru Yano. Now, we have talked about Toru Yano a lot on this show and how he had a bit of a switch flip in his head during that stadium show where he's like, oh, I'm good. I can beat these guys. Like, I can just be a good wrestler and still get over with the crowd and still be that guy. Because he's always been good. He's always known he was good, but he's always been the advocate, the tourism director, the funny guy who happens to be able to pull out some wrestling moves. But it seems like at the Nippon Stadium show, he really kind of turned that on its head and was like, oh no, I'm gonna beat you down and they're still gonna love me and this is gonna go perfectly. So what did you think about that match?
I'll talk about it. Yeah, with the final four and going to lead into the second day. I'm going to piggyback on your Toru Yano observations. He was a serious wrestler for a time. I want to say until about 2012, 2013. It might have been even later when he took on the comedy role. The guy can wrestle, and that's what maybe a lot of people out there don't know and don't realize. But now to kind of see a twist for him to maybe go like kind of bring back 20% of that old character to tie in with that same guy who's like trying to like ship his CDs to his opponents, who's tying people in knots outside the ring and to post to chairs. And then there was the I'm gonna laugh out loud big time on this one, the Hiromu Takahashi match where he ended up going up in an elevator in the New Japan Cup. I mean, my goodness. I think it's really cool. I used to actually, funny thing about Toru Yano, I wasn't a huge fan of his because I wasn't familiar with who he was, and I had to go back and watch a lot of who he was and who he's become. And I think this is really cool. And it's a one thing about professional wrestling is that if you are very similar to another character, it's harder for you to get over. So if you can play a different character and do it to the best of your maximum capabilities and still get over, you're adding value to that show. So seeing Toru Yano do that in that light is really, I've grown a huge appreciation for him. And then to see Fale, who's gotten in much better shape ever since he went back to America and then came back, to see a junior like Bushi, which was it's a little unusual. Their treatment of juniors up until recently with the pre-pandemic was just they're just going to be guys getting pinned in multi-man matches. So to see him in there was really cool. And then, of course, with another Bullet Club member, Chase Owens, it's a really cool ending to see. And that final four is pretty solid heading into the next day.
Absolutely. Jam, you got any thoughts on that match?
I might have missed it, but did you say who won? I'm sorry if I missed that part.
So it was a scramble match. So the final four in the ring are the four going into the Wrestle Kingdom 15 Night 2 match to determine who will be King of Pro Wrestling 2021. So no one actually won. There are just four contenders remaining that'll go into Night 2 and contend for that title.
Oh, that's really creative. Did they do that last year?
Not for King of Pro Wrestling. They do a scramble match usually to kick off Wrestle Kingdom, or at least they have the last couple of years. But last year, I believe it was I don't even think it was for anything really. It was just a scramble match to be a scramble match. That might be a question for Jesse.
Yeah, there was a decisive winner. And because my memory has become a lot more short term this year, I do not remember who won the Wrestle Kingdom 14 match. But there's usually a decisive winner. It's kind of similar to, they added this variation on, like you said, Sam, kind of similar to the AEW Diamond Battle Royal, where like you would get down to the final two, then the final two would have a face off.
Okay, that's really creative. Like I really like the sound of that. It makes you want to see night two if you weren't watching night two already, and for that to be the final four, I think that's really dope. Like I've talked about on here before, I love Toriano. The fact that he's getting some time to shine as a more serious wrestler, or at least a comedy wrestler with shades of seriousness. I think that's super dope. It kind of reminds me of when they did that with Santino Marella like a few years ago. That's another guy who started off serious and he became really heavy into comedy, but then the more he kind of got shades of seriousness, you got crazy moments like him almost winning the Royal Rumble, almost winning the World Title. And I can see him going that road with Toriano too, though with New Japan being so unpredictable. Maybe Toriano actually does win a world title in the future.
Yeah, definitely. And now moving on to the match that Jesse alluded to earlier on, Hiromu Takahashi defeated El Phantasmo to remain number one contender for the IWGP Junior Heavyweight Championship. Now, just saying that Takahashi defeated El Phantasmo doesn't really do this match justice. It ran for almost 20 minutes, and Takahashi just demoralized Phantasmo. He looks like a completely different guy by the end of it. He looks broken down and beaten and just a sad shell of a person who came into New Japan with all this promise and all this like puff and all of this like vigor to say, I'm El Phantasmo, I'm from the UK, I don't do the, dojo system. I don't do any of that crap. You want me, you're going to have me the way I am. He came in, he took a major role in the Bullet Club, and this is just a major, major blow to his ego, if not his character. And it was a really, really entertaining match.
You couldn't open up a Wrestle Kingdom better than that. I'm just even from years past. And the one thing that I have a small concern with Hiromu Takahashi, in that he's going to end up like Tetsuya Naito and Kota Ibushi are in the near future. A couple of times he landed on his neck and I cringed, and I was like, we're going to see a lot of this in the main event, aren't we? But I digress there. The match was fantastic. El Phantasmo doing those cool heel things, like a lot of, for paying homage to Bullet Club, he was pulling out a lot of finishers. He tried a one-wing angel, Styles Clash a couple times. And then the really cool spot with him kind of doing the Undertaker's walk, holding Takahashi's hand on the top rope, and then all of a sudden he executes a moonsault from the top rope, but while he's like doing the rotation, he's doing the too sweet sign, and if you slow it down, it's awesome. I'm looking forward to seeing Hiromu Takahashi kind of evolve the way that Will Ospreay did, add some weight and head up to the heavyweight division. I think that's his next move. I don't think it's going to come maybe later this year or the beginning to middle of next year. But one thing's for sure, he's ready for it, and he proved that in this New Japan Cup. So this match was fantastic. Great start. Kind of a prelude to what's going to be coming later.
Absolutely. Jam, just on site, do you have any thoughts about this? Any, concerns, any impressions?
Not too much, just because Jesse hit nail on the head, and I haven't seen too much of El Phantasmo. I kind of saw him in like Little Spades back in the day, like not too much entering stuff, but I see enough of his character to know that he's a really charming guy and charismatic guy. But that definitely does sound awesome if he's doing like Undertaker, old school, into a moonsault. That's super talented. But with Hiromu Takahashi, I definitely see that for his future as well. Like he's so popular and just so charismatic as a character and done enough in junior heavyweight division that I can definitely see him going the narrow route and just going to the heavyweight class, maybe win a heavyweight championship. And it's worrisome to hear that he's still doing scary stuff with his neck. But I am glad to see that New Japan are still super invested in pushing him really hard. It sounds like that ever since come back from injury, they've basically put a rocket strap on his back and basically got him going just as hard as he did before he got injured, if not harder. So hopefully that means good things for his career going forward.
Absolutely. He definitely strikes me as the kind of guy that, to piggyback off Jesse, needs to take that Will Ospreay kind of stance in his career where he transitioned from the aerial assassin to just the assassin. Why would I hurt myself to hurt you when I know I can just knock your head off its shoulders and I'm going to get that W anyway? He needs to make that shift in style, or we're going to have a very short time with him, and that makes me so sad because he is such a talented guy. He is so in tune with the audience and exactly what they want in New Japan, where his whole thing is, he's got the younger people just eating out of his hand at these shows. And it's one of those things where I swear to God, every time he goes back on that neck of his, I curl up inside myself and I just start praying. It's horrifying, but so entertaining. All right, continuing on, we have the IWGP Heavyweight Tag Team Championship match between Tama Tonga and Tonga Loa, the Gorillas of Destiny, facing off against Taichi and Zack Sabre Jr. Their Dangerous Techers is, I believe, the name of their tag team. Now, the important thing to note about this match before we even get into this match is that the Gorillas of Destiny are cornered by Jado. The Dangerous Techers were cornered by Doki. This is incredibly important because those two immediately get involved. Now, if the IWGP Junior Heavyweight title was a ode to professional wrestling today, this match was everything professional wrestling was in the 80s and 90s. The way that the Gorillas of Destiny just dismantled Dangerous Techers and used their ability to work together and the fact that they are family and blood and have that deeper connection to just screw with them throughout the match was such a wonderful thing. And they were able to break their curse. They were able to win the IWGP Heavyweight Tag Team Championships at Wrestle Kingdom for the first time in their careers.
I'm going to keep this short. The Gorillas of Destiny, this might have been the best tag team performance I've seen from them ever. And I don't know if that's a testament to like who their opponents were, because Zack Sabre Jr. is one of the best in-ring technicians in the world, if not the top guy. And Taichi's improvement over the last 2-3 years has been quite remarkable. He's always had that character, whether you love him, you hate him, you don't appreciate him, you appreciate him. He's gotten so much better. So that being said, Sam, you touched on it beautifully. There was very good tag team display from the Gorillas of Destiny. They empowered and enforced their will and just ran over the Dangerous Techers. But to be honest, like I said, best performance I've seen out of Gorillas of Destiny ever.
I kind of want to take a second and just go back to what Jesse was saying that was the best performance that the Gorillas of Destiny had. Like, I was always like a big fan of Gorillas of Destiny, so that's some super high praise to me. Like, but like on top of just that, like it's what's really interesting about that is just like knowing their opponents in the match, because though Zack Sabre is one of the best technical wrestlers ever, maybe the best one going today, he's also like I've never seen him work with Taichi, and Taichi is someone who I always know as basically like the redhead stepchild of New Japan, and that people always kind of gave him a bad rep. Like, I've seen critics say that he's just flat out terrible, and though I never thought he was that bad, he, in terms of talent at least, he definitely seemed like not a weak link, but the inexperience is there, which it's gonna be there when you're staying next to guys like Tanahashi and Okada. Like, if you've got less experience, it's gonna show next to like some god tier talent. So like the fact he's improved that much to not only have a great match with these three guys, but to have a great tag team match. And Sam knows as well as anybody just how much I love tag team wrestling. So this sounds like something I may have to hunt down in the future.
Absolutely. So before we get into the next match, we do want to talk about the John Moxley promo. He is back in New Japan, sort of, kind of. He appears on the television screen, the jumbotron, the big screen above the ramp, and he's reminding everyone that he is the U.S. champion. The important thing to me, the thing that I just hit me right in the gut at like 3 a.m. when I watched this live, was that his entrance music was Brody Lee's indie music. It was the what is his name, Man in Black, Johnny Cash. I'm not sure what the name of the song is, you hear the guitar strum, you hear the opening note, and you're just like, oh god, and you just kind of crumple a little bit because they were such close friends. They were, they built their careers on each other and beating the shit out of each other. So that little tribute that a lot of the Eastern audience and even a lot of the Western audience watching Wrestle Kingdom just isn't going to pick up on, isn't going to get that shift in entrance music isn't a shift in character, but a tribute, was just so beautiful to me.
And one thing that 2020 robbed us of, and there's so many things that it robbed us of, but was to see the foreign talent go back and forth. I get a weird feeling that the Good Brothers were going to show up for the World Tag League in 2020. Moxley would have had another G1 run, had some more title defenses, because everyone's been wondering, like, where's Jon Moxley? Where's Jon Moxley? Why hasn't he wrestled Kenta, like, in America, from what I've been told? And I'm not sure if this is true, but he's not allowed to wrestle wrestle on New Japan's turf in America. That is, it has to be overseas. A lot of these guys have contracts to go back and forth. So with that being said, the promo was a great reintroduction, and we all know how great Moxley's promo skills are. So we're really looking forward to his first United States title defense, whenever that may be. Hoping the next couple of months.
Yeah, especially now that, the vaccine is sort of being more widely available, and, Japan seems to have quashed their second wave and is opening up the travel restrictions a little bit. Hopefully we're going to see Jon Moxley back in a New Japan ring sooner than later to face off with Kenta and just destroy whatever bingo hall they end up in. But that'll bring us to the match, which is Kenta facing off against the legend Satoshi Kojima with Hiroshi Tenzan in his corner. Now, something happened before, like at the Road to Wrestle Kingdom shows, where the person who was going to be facing off with Kenta ended up not being able to come into the match. So Satoshi Kojima, who didn't have a match on Wrestle Kingdom, kind of stepped into that role with, I believe they said on commentary, like 72 hours notice. Jesse, do you have any further insight on what was supposed to be that match?
Juice Robinson was supposed to be taking on Kenta, and he suffered, I know, some sort of injury. I want to say it was his knee. I'm not 100% sure. Kenta obviously performed well. He's got a new lease on life back home, and thankfully he stayed healthy, which is hard to believe because Japan's style is much more stiff as opposed to here in America. So yeah, to see him get the victory and to further it, and we've been clamoring for Moxley and Kenta now for probably 7 months, ever since Kenta won that contract. Actually, that wasn't that long ago, but we still been clamoring for Moxley and Kenta, and now we're finally gonna get to see it, but now we have to hurry up and wait some more.
Absolutely, and it was mentioned on commentary after he retained the briefcase in a good match that this was his fifth retainment of the briefcase of the contract for that U.S. title, which would make him technically, as the interim U.S. champion, the longest defending U.S. champion, either interim or crowned, in the history of the promotion, which I think is just such a cool nod and story beat, where you have Jon Moxley in AEW who drops the title to Kenny Omega, and then you have him, at least in storyline, ducking Kenta for the last 7 months, and you can kind of play with that psychology of, well, I've been here, I've been defending my title, where have you been? What have you been doing? And you can really play with that psychology across the two brands there, and that's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, first off, just bummer about Juice Robinson. Like I remember Sam's kind of been telling me just here and there he's been doing some interesting stuff in the ring and in character. So if this was going to be like his crowning moment as like a serious mid-card wrestler, maybe upper mid-card, close to main event type of thing, then that's such a bummer for him. But in that regard, also with Kojima, just props to Kojima for just coming in last minutes and from sounds of it, had a good match. Was the match good?
I mean, it was a Kojima match. It was good, but it's a lot like watching current Chris Jericho, where you're like, oh, you've been wrestling for a very long time in a very stiff Japanese style, and you are a legend, no doubt about that. But it might be time to start thinking about going the way of Jushin Liger there, sir. It's just it's sad to watch him now when you think back to his time in All Japan Pro Wrestling and winning the Triple Crown title and winning the what is their G1 called, the Wrestling Festival title, and all of these things, and then seeing him kind of not so much struggle to get around in the ring, but definitely be a step or two slower than he was.
That's kind of a bummer, but in any case, then I guess it kind of also speaks to just what I think 2021 is gonna kind of look for just wrestling in general. Like Jesse said, 2020 robbed us of a lot of good things, but I also think that in a kind of like topsy-turvy type of way, it also sets up a lot of good things for 2021, and that this year basically playing catch up for everything that we missed in 2020. So like we finally are getting closer to seeing Jon Moxley come back to New Japan, Russell Kenta have whatever other type of title defenses he could have with that belt in New Japan. You also, again, Gallows and Anderson closer to coming back to New Japan. A lot of stuff is falling into place where I think 2021 could be a really exciting year for wrestling just by catching up on everything we missed in 2020.
It also prolonged careers, like those who are on the tail end. You have like Naito, who's been nursing injuries for 2-3 years, but he's persevered through it. The guy we're going to talk about next, Hiroshi Tanahashi, same thing. He's had some really bad knees. Obviously, working that stiff style is extremely difficult to do. The schedule gets super demanding for them right around G1 time, so to give them that extra, what was it, probably 4 or 5 months before they came back was extremely helpful, so they can recoup, go from 40% to like 80, 85, get back to that level. And yeah, again, it's going to prolong them for the future.
Absolutely. And that'll actually bring us into our next match, which is Hiroshi Tanahashi, who faced off with the Great Okan. Now, Great Okan is one of those guys that when he came back from excursion and they put that damn burlap sack over his head, I got so frustrated because he's such a huge, imposing guy. He's bigger than Fale, I believe. He's like 7 foot something. He's a like all Japan champion amateur wrestler. He's an incredibly huge, like strong, legit guy. And the fact that they kind of saddled him with this weird character always kind of bugged me, but it does seem to be paying off. This was a fantastic match. Tanahashi came away with the W, which I don't think anyone is surprised about, but he definitely had to work for it harder than I think he was expecting to going in.
Yeah, and it's the changing of the guard eventually. Okan had just come back from excursion, so very similar to Jay White back in 2017 or 2018. It was Wrestle Kingdom 12, yeah, where he had the Intercontinental Championship match literally 2-3 months out of his excursion against Tanahashi. Tanahashi won the match, but White looked okay, and we've seen what Jay White looks like now. So we're hoping that same career trajectory takes place for the Great Okan. I honestly don't know too much about him. I know that he had a big undefeated streak in Rev Pro when he was in Britain. The guy didn't lose much, if at all. So there is a lot of faith in him going forward. With that being said, yeah, I mean, there's a super bright future because a lot of these guys are getting older. We talked about Kojima. We talked about Tanahashi. So we need those younger guys to kind of come back from their excursions or just new talent from the dojos. And the guy I'm looking forward to the most who wasn't near the card was Shota Umuno. But yeah, I mean, their time's coming. So again, Tanahashi won. It was great to see Okan get a match on the card and look pretty solid in it too. So bright future.
Yeah, and the thing about Okan that is so interesting, and I hope they dive in deeper, and this is entirely if you believe the New Japan website itself about their wrestlers, he did not have a point scored on him his entire what we call our senior year here of amateur wrestling. So the fact that he didn't lose a single point his entire senior year and went on to win the all Japanese, amateur wrestling championship, and then ended up looking towards college and looking towards becoming a wrestler in the Olympics and going that route, and then ended up at a seminar and becoming a pro wrestler and doing the dojo system is such a striking statement on the cultural impact that New Japan has and the pool that they have, that they were able to take this kid who would have been and could still be a cultural hero to the Japanese people and say, come do pro wrestling. Come be in costumes and do fun things with us. Don't worry about being a Jeff Cobb and going to the Olympics and then transitioning. Transition now while you're young and your knees can handle it, and you can be this incredible guy who puts together this career. And it's so interesting when you look at guys that end up being big in the Western world where they played college football to a middling success, or you have guys like Baron Corbin, who played for the Patriots for 2 seasons on their practice squad before he got cut, and then he went to the WWE. These guys, pro wrestling, if not their dream from childhood, is a valued career from the jump, and it's so interesting watching how much more respect they put on the sport and the art form, and how that changes the product that's kind of given out to us.
I can't speak much on who Okan is, just because I've never seen him, never heard of him. Though, like, first off, his backstories sound super interesting, super phenomenal, and just if he's as big, if not bigger than Bad Luck Fale, he's already got a fan in me. But it's if he's coming back from excursion, then I think he's already got a bright future. Like New Japan typically has a history with bringing back really, really talented guys from excursion and molding them into these impactful, phenomenal wrestlers and characters. Like Jesse mentioned Jay White. I remember they did the exact same thing for Okada in 2011, 2012. He came back from Impact for about year, 2 years, however many years it was. Comes back, his basically debut match is a Wrestle Kingdom match. Very next month, he beat Tanahashi for the world title at New Beginning, and now we know what his career has been in the 8, 9 years since then. If Okan can have half of the career that either Jay Wright or Okada's had, he's gonna be one of the best ever, and he sounds like he's already on his way. If he's having a fantastic match with Tanahashi.
Absolutely. And just to comment on his size, he is listed at 6'2", 243 pounds, but that is entirely muscle. The guy is scary imposing.
I thought he was bigger. I thought he was like 6'5", 6'6". So yeah, that's news to me too.
But I think that also goes to show just how charismatic he is in the ring, where, to my knowledge, you haven't heard Okan speak once in the ring or backstage, because he came out, he did his thing at his debut, and then he kind of immediately fell in line behind Ospreay as part of Empire, and has done that thing. So the fact that he's been able to be this imposing force that even if you're not super familiar with, you can picture him in your head, like even just hearing that name and hearing his character and his backstory, you've got an idea of what he looks like. The fact that he's able to do that without saying a word is just so indicative of the kind of guy he will be once he's able to either take the reins of Empire or move away from Empire and start doing things on his own. But that'll actually bring us to our next match, which is Kazuchika Okada facing off with the head of Empire, Will Ospreay, who was cornered by his girlfriend and Stardom champion Bea Priestley. This was odd to me just because they've done this whole thing where, Will breaks away and he starts his own faction. He's tired of living in the shadows. He wants to be the star. He wants to be the guy in charge, the big man, the one. Aside from Great Okan, none of his faction have matches on the first night, but it's only B who walks him out. So I don't know if that was a deliberate choice, but obviously it was a deliberate choice by New Japan. They don't do anything by accident, but I'm curious to see why it was that Ospreay came out just with B, who wouldn't be able to back him up. And maybe it was a bit of hubris, a little bit of flying too close to the sun there, but he did end up coming up short against Okada. But man, just like that Tanahashi match, Okada had to work for it. I don't think he was prepared to work for it, but oh boy. And that one went almost 40 minutes. It was it was obviously my favorite match of the night. It even beat out the main event. I do think you should have flipped the main event in this match. I understand why you didn't, but I do feel like this match would have been better served to be the one that sends people home.
Wrestle Kingdom always has a history of having a match of the year within the first 4 days, and people will go back to it. It'll always be in their memory bank. Like, as soon as you can't have a match of the year list without going back to at least 2 or 3 matches from Wrestle Kingdom, and this one's the leader in the clubhouse right now, and I think it's going to be there for quite a while, honestly, until probably G1 time, and then you might see something pop up there. This was a different side of Will Ospreay that we haven't seen in ever. We're used to, again, like Sam alluded to earlier, with the aerial assassin. Now he's the assassin. There wasn't too much high flying from Ospreay. He did a top rope Spanish fly, did a couple of flips on the outside, but just kind of the usual, like, I'm going to use my speed and I'm going to use my overall wrestling ability to defeat you. Ultimately, just he strayed away from it. He went to a more brutal style, and to see these two, you could tell just the back and forth, just and the psychology of it all. Okada is a master, arguably the best ever when it comes to the psychology piece of it. So to see them go 35 minutes to be fully invested in it all the way through is just a testament. And when these two hit the ring, you know that like they're probably two of the top 5 world-class performers alive right now. Even though we know that like Will Ospreay is not the greatest of humans at the moment. Kind of hoping that he eventually just kind of matures. He's kind of had that history in that past. People can look past some of his stuff, but like recently with a lot of the Me Too movement, it's hard to watch a Will Ospreay match and not think about that. I guess to close this kind of thought in my head. The big thing. Okada finally breaking out the Rainmaker at the end after almost a year of not using it. Going to that money clip as Josiah has said countlessly on Slack. He's just like, the Rainmaker is going to come out at an opportune time, and it's likely going to come out on someone that you want it to come out on. And the entire like wrestling world is going to rejoice when it happens. And of course, he called it on everything. Fantastic match.
Absolutely. Jam, you got any thoughts on this one?
Well, first off, I didn't realize that he hasn't been using the Rainmaker for a year. That's an interesting choice, but like Josiah would say, like you save a moment like that for a big moment, and if you're saving it for the very end of the big Tokyo Dome match that everyone's watching, he picked the perfect time to do it. And I can't speak much to what's going on with Will Ospreay with the Me Too movement. That's kind of a blind spot for me, unfortunately.
You know, you can't talk about Ospreay in 2021 without mentioning that the guy has had some really, really shitty stuff come out about him. There's no arguing that he's not always used the best judgment when it comes to interacting with people. And it really does suck because he is just such a talented guy. But, I don't know. It's rough. It's hard to watch his matches and come at it without wanting to see him just get his ass handed to him. Kind of in the same way that you watch a Velveteen Dream hoping that someone breaks his wrist. It's very different levels of fucked up, but it's all kind of in that same spectrum of just being, a jackass and using your power to put people down because you can. But that'll actually bring us to the main event of night 1, which was the IWGP Heavyweight and IWGP Intercontinental Championship double title match, which saw Kota Ibushi facing off against champion Tetsuya Naito. He won the match, which was insane. It was a fantastic match, probably one of my more enjoyable Ibushi matches since Omega has left New Japan. It's still not to the level he was when Omega was there, and you can get into why he's wrestling at a lower level, why he seems to not have that spark there, and get into all of that, conspiracy theory stuff yourself. I don't know. It doesn't seem like he's operating at the same level. He's obviously been dealing with a lot of injuries. He lost a lot of teeth during the G1. So, that's obviously going to mess with him a little bit. This was a great match. I don't think it should have been the main event. I get why it was. It was still fantastic, though.
Yeah, this is the crowning. I have been personally waiting for this for a long time. I've always felt that Kota Ibushi, and this is my opinion, people are going to completely disagree with me on it. I've always been shouting his praises for a long time. I've always thought he's been one of, if not the best wrestler in the world, and especially in terms of a talent level. So to see this finally happen has been great. Finally signed a contract with New Japan. I think that's the biggest exclusively, which is the biggest reason why he's now getting this run. So to see him last year lose the initial main event to Okada, which was also a fantastic match, and then come back the next night, lose to Jay White, it was just like, all right, you won the G1, you got put in your place. All right, we're going to have you take a couple steps back. So they put him in a program with Tanahashi. They became tag champs. Then all of a sudden at G1, he comes up out of nowhere, and I don't know how many people called him becoming the winner of the G1. I know I sure didn't. I had Jay White pinned for it. I was convinced he was going to main event Tokyo Dome, which of course we're going to learn later that he does the next night. So to see kind of Kota get his comeuppance once again, he's just kind of like laying back in the weeds, very similar to what Okada did over the last year, to give Naito the prominence, like the run that he absolutely deserved, because he's been a fighting champion. He's deserved that run after his character build from the last 2 years prior, where he had just come up short. Everyone thought it was his time. Nope, just needed to be a redemption story. It was just time for him to like start all over again. Bam, come up. I guess as it pertains to the match, it was a great match. Both their necks held up in spite of getting dropped on it a few times. It was pretty brutal. Outside of that, yeah, there were some fantastic spots, and I've always thought these two have tremendous chemistry. I've always felt like Naito. That's one thing too about Naito. Naito has tremendous chemistry with Ibushi, pretty solid chemistry with Okada, and then when Omega was there, their matches to me were like the best. I don't know, their chemistry was just incredible. So Naito has that ability to connect with the most popular wrestlers on New Japan stage, and the best. So the match overall was good. I felt it should have main evented just for the reasons we kind of had a feeling Okada and Ospreay would upstage it, but it's hard to have that not be the main event because it's for the two most prestigious championships in the company.
Absolutely, and I get where you're coming from with that match and why you liked it so much and why you think it should have main evented. For whatever reason, it just felt like something was missing there for me. They've obviously got incredible chemistry. You wanted to see him get this opportunity. You wanted to see Ibushi finally make that leap and become the top guy that you knew he could be and that you knew he would be once given that opportunity. It felt a little off to me for whatever reason. I don't know why. It might just be my own personal stuff of like, well, this could have been a perfect time to bring back Omega and kind of perfectly like meld those two worlds and have him rush down as the match is starting to come to an end and see that Tetsuya is going to win and corner him and do the whole Golden Lovers 2.0 reunion thing where he, by the power of Omega, he's able to come back. But that's my own little fan fiction brain kind of running wild there. I don't know, it felt like a match for match's sake, and there didn't seem to be, at least to me, a ton of story reason behind, well, this is why we're giving it to Kota now. This is why he deserved that moment now.
I think the one swerve outside of the stuff I had mentioned earlier with him being in the background, the swerve was him losing the briefcase. And I think that's probably the main reason why you could argue it probably shouldn't have been the main event. And I guess I don't blame you for that rationale. I guess then the question becomes, like, do you throw Kota Ibushi in a moderately meaningless match on the card at Wrestle Kingdom, and which you honestly could have, just because he lost those rights in that match by putting the briefcase up and becoming the first man to lose it. So yeah, it's a fair point.
I can definitely see where both of you are coming from, because like with what Jesse was saying, that like I would bet all the money in the world last year that Kota Ibushi was going to walk into Wrestle Kingdom and win the world title. That didn't happen, and from sounds of it, he lost a lot of steam from that. He did lose a lot of steam from that. But at the same time, I also think he may have lost steam from just not having Kenny Omega by his side. Like, not saying that he needs Kenny Omega, but I think without that person who he's had so much history with, and the fact you can't integrate that into the story anymore, you lose a lot of story opportunities. And when you lose a lot of that, you lose pretty much the essence, or at least half of the essence of the Kota Ibushi character. And you lose, most importantly, a big reason why fans kind of fell in love with him around the world. And at that point, Kota was kind of just winning it. Like, the last stuff I saw of him was when he did win the tag team titles with Tanahashi. And even then, that kind of threw fans a bone there. But at the same time, in the back of our minds, we're like, this is cool, but I want to see him in the main event picture. Then he gets the G1 Climax win again, and he loses the briefcase, and it's like, okay, you're pulling the rug under him again. And it seems like by the time we actually get to Wrestle Kingdom this year, a lot of people are kind of like, oh, it's cool, he's finally got the world title, but look at what's happened to him to get here. It reminds me of, well, another Western company that does this with a lot of their guys in the main event. They may beat their guy week after week after week after week, and then come WrestleMania or whatever big event comes, they win the world title, and no one really is as jazzed as they would if they didn't lose every single week leading up to the main event. So it seems like Kota Ibushi's in the main spot. I meant to say same spot, but like even then, like I'm glad to hear he's finally got that big moments, but knowing like all things that's happened in last year and the context of last year's Wrestle Kingdom, it's it doesn't it doesn't sound as sweet as it would if certain circumstances didn't fall into place the way they did.
That'll actually bring us into Wrestle Kingdom Night 2. That kicked off with the King of Pro Wrestling 2021 championship match where Toru Bushi and Chase Owens and Bad Luck Fale faced off to earn that title. Toru Yano ends up coming out victorious. It was a short match. It was okay. It kind of struck me as more of a Toru Yano 2019 match, more so than what we had seen recently, where he kind of reverted a little bit, but it worked out for him. So, I'm always happy to see Yano, carrying around that the King of Pro Wrestling and being that guy, that advocate there. It's just, it was interesting. It was a weird, short, like less than 8-minute match. I don't know.
Well, first off, shout out to Toru Yano for getting a big win like that. Though it's interesting that you say that he's kind of, it seems like he's reverted back to that comedy character again. So with that, I kind of want to ask you both, like, do you see him ever going the full stop of I'm going to be a 100% super serious wrestler, or do you think he's just going to be like ebbs and flows like he's been this year?
I think the way that this trophy was presented, or just kind of the concept was, I think there were actually, wasn't Okada in this tournament at one point in time where they threw together, like, I think what it was you pit two guys against one another, one-on-one, in a stipulation that was determined by one of the participants in the match.
Mhm.
So this is a brand spanking new trophy, so it's really hard to tell like what they're gonna do with it. Again, I don't know if it's a nod to like us here in the States with the 24/7 championship or what it looks like. But going back to your question, Yano being a serious wrestler again, gosh, it's really hard to tell. Jury's out. I think it's gonna be more of a, I think like Sam alluded to earlier, they're gonna like tap into his seriousness, but also got to keep the comedy gimmick strong.
Yeah, and that's kind of where I was going with it. Is I do think it's going to be a provisional thing where he'll be serious when he needs to be serious if he is faced in a situation where that's what's necessary. But as far as being serious all the time, I don't think he will, and I don't think he needs to be. Honestly, I think his success and his skill comes from having that ability to show through his ring work that he has that switch in his head, that he can go to that next level, he can hit that next thing. It's kind of like Shawn Michaels early 90s where, he didn't care. He was there, he was fun, he was talented. He didn't care though. But then, you put him in that match where he had something to lose, he had something to prove, and it would turn on and he'd show up. He would fight the guys like Brett. He would do that thing. I think that's where they're going with the Toru Yano character, where he's gonna have fun, he's gonna enjoy himself, but when it counts, he'll turn it on. He is at a point in that company where he can advocate for himself enough that he can be like, no. I'm over because I'm fun. I'm over because I'm able to kind of show that mirror back to the audience. Like, you're watching grown men fight in costume. Relax. All right, and that'll bring us to the Big Hoss section of the card, where the Never Openweight Championship was faced off with Shingo Takagi facing Jeff Cobb. This match was everything I've ever wanted a Jeff Cobb match to be. I'm a big Jeff Cobb guy. This is just, it's the very distinct, like, oh, this is what you could have been doing in your early Ring of Honor days. This is what you should have been doing when you got brought in for 20 minutes to AEW. These are the kinds of matches you should have been having. And if he spends the rest of his career in Japan, I will be a happy, happy man, because this match was insane and just so good. And this is one of those where they ended it around 21 minutes. I could have watched these two just beat each other down for 40, and I would have been happy to do it.
I think this was the token either Tomohiro Ishii or Minoru Suzuki match on the card, which we usually see every year and we don't get. I'm just very, very happy that it was Jeff Cobb and Shingo Takagi getting this. I told Jam right before you came on, Sam, that I was probably about 2/3 of the way through the rewatch of this match before you stepped on. So, yeah, it was so fun. This is something that is truly appreciative. Like, some people really like kind of the beautiful aerial style, the technical style, the psychology style. There are others that just like a good old fashioned just chop battle and just dudes just beating the crap out of each other. That's what we got here. Shingo Takagi to me is the most underappreciated, I would say, star that they have on that roster. I think you could really give him a big push towards the world championship and make him a credible contender. I wouldn't argue with it. The guy's great. He was successful in Dragon Gate. He's successful everywhere he's gone. And we finally get to see, this side of Jeff Cobb, the PWG champion, Battle of Los Angeles winner. I think Shingo Takagi was in that match with him, and that's what Kevin Kelly said in the top of the match. So we're really looking forward to seeing the evolution of Jeff Cobb. We're hoping he stays there. Maybe he comes over for an appearance or two on like Impact, Ring of Honor. But by then, I think maybe the American audience will go, yes, this was the Jeff Cobb that I remembered when I saw him 3-4 years ago, and this was the guy we were waiting for. So yes, it was definitely worth the rewatch, and I'm looking forward to seeing the last 5 minutes when we get off of the air here.
Yeah, Cobb is definitely one of those guys where the Japanese style of just come out and beat each other down benefits him a lot more than no, you need to be good on the mic. You need to have that character down that the Western audiences have gotten so used to. And as a guy whose favorite wrestlers are Bruiser Brody and Andre the Giant, like the willingness to just beat each other to a bloody pulp is one of my favorite things in wrestling, and one of the things that gravitated me so much to this company is that they work such a snug style that it could be a shoot. We don't know. I don't think it was, but it could have been. This is such a good match. It really kind of elevated Jeff Cobb to that other level and gave Empire that second star. And if it ever happens, the Jeff Cobb, Will Ospreay blow off for the leadership of Empire is going to be a really, really fun event.
I noticed that like New Japan is really good at just putting on Haas matches, especially at Wrestle Kingdom. If you need two big, stiff, strong guys just stiff arming each other for 20 minutes, New Japan's the content to watch. And like Jesse said, like this was kind of the Tomohiro spot match, it sounds like, where you just get two guys doing it. I'm glad Jeff Cobb and Shingo were doing it because they're two tremendous talents, especially Cobb. The fact that they had that type of spot, a spot that's often been like the match of the night, or at least like the show stealer of the night every year at Wrestle Kingdom. I'm very happy for them, and it sounds like another match I may have to hunt down one of these days.
This, I think, in terms of like, yeah, the ones that are maybe a little bit lesser known as opposed to like the main events, yeah, this is the one to go out of your way to see that was in the middle of the card. Shingo's been doing this ever since he broke off, like when they gave him the dominant Super Junior run. And then my favorite match of 2019 was him and Will Ospreay in the junior final. Was just one of the most electric things I've ever seen. To see them almost replicated again in G1 this year, and then Okada and Shingo had an absolute just amazing match. So again, I'm really looking forward to seeing the evolution of Shingo Takagi in 2021, hopefully giving him a more prominent title, which I guess with that being said, I'd love to see Jeff Cobb take the never openweight championship off of him in a rematch and then let him hold it for a while, become dominant. And then it'll be his turn to kind of step into that role, maybe in the IC title situation. And then lastly on that, a Cobb Ospreay blow off for Empire would be awesome. They had a great match with the Ring of Honor New Japan co-show and at MSG back in 2018, 2019. It was a fun match, and Cobb is super athletic, something that I don't think we mentioned here, but a guy who's that big that can do some crazy things. He's very, very agile. Also with the Olympic wrestling background, so there's more to it than just the I'm gonna beat the crap out of you type style.
Oh, absolutely. He definitely has that ability to work the Haas style, but then also keep up with the guys like Will Ospreay in the ring with like that high flippy style. And that actually brings us to our next match, which is Sonata facing off against Evil, who was cornered by Dick Togo. This was an interesting match. It was good. Sonata and Evil obviously have insane chemistry. It ran for about 23, 24 minutes. It felt weird that these two were facing off without a title on the line. It is one of those, like, I don't want you to go to that well too many times for fear that it gets boring. It's one of those, they're both very talented guys. I don't think they're at that level of Okada and Omega where you can do this 5 times over the course of a year and every single one of them is a final for best match of the year. It was, I mean, it was good. I enjoyed it. It didn't have that same urgency that the others have had.
I think that comes with the Sonata character. It's a little bit laissez-faire, kind of. I wouldn't say disinterested, but kind of sleepy. Sonata is an excellent performer. He's extremely talented, but he's never really gone to that next level. And when he has tried to go to that next level, he's put on a great performance, and he's always came up short. With him getting the W here over his former stablemate, who knows where that puts him? I still think that kind of puts him in limbo. And the other biggest question out of this too is Evil and Bullet Club. With his inclusion in Bullet Club, other than Gato and possibly Yujiro Takahashi, I'm guessing that Evil is maybe one of the first homegrown New Japan, like Japanese born performers that were in the Bullet Club. So I'm super curious if he's going to stay, like how that's going to work. Just that dynamic with because when Jay White left, when the pandemic started, that's when Evil was kind of shifted over, and now he became the leader, kind of default, because Kenta was also in the States. So it was just kind of one of those things where, yep, Evil was just thrown in there because we didn't have anything else, or what it was. So I'm anxious to see which direction both of those guys go. I'm not 100% sure.
If anything, it seems like the problem here is that like both guys really made each other better when they were in the stable together. And like when you kind of break off, it's a common thing with tag teams and stables. Like when you see two people with great chemistry, that chemistry doesn't always make for great rivals. Like you may be a great pair, but not so great matches against each other, or you're not really enticed to see them face off against each other. And it seems like that's the case here, though. Like you said, like they could stretch this out a little more and they can develop chemistry from there. Then you run the risk of maybe just going to the well too many times and not being able to live up to expectations. But if push comes to shove, like if they don't keep clicking, they can always pair back together, hopefully.
Absolutely agreed. And that'll bring us to the second to last match of the night, which was the IWGP Junior Heavyweight Championship match. Hiromu Takahashi facing off with Taiji Ishimori. This one ran about 25, almost 26 minutes. This was so good. It was everything that you expect now from Ishimori and Takahashi. It was their kind of perfect swan song match, if you ask me. It's definitely one where you sit back and you look at it and you go, well, how do they top this the next time? Like how, because that is their style is, oh, we did this, okay, we're going to do this now. And they pulled out so much on this match that you can't see where they're going to go with it next. But that's one of the more exciting things about New Japan, is that they've always got plans. They're planning things 3, 4, 5 months in advance, so they know where they're taking this story, they know where they're taking these matches. And this is a really good one. This is another one of those contenders for match of the weekend for me.
100% on those two. They have incredible chemistry with that Best of Super Juniors final that they had in 2018, or was it 2018? Yeah.
Best of Super Junior final 2018 was Osprey and Shingo, wasn't it?
I think that was 2019. I know, it's crazy, just kind of that forgotten year. Yeah, it was 2019.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
Because Osprey was one of the first to do both the Best of Super Juniors and the G1, which,
yes,
my gosh, I don't know how anyone can do that. Yeah. That being said, that's the one thing about New Japan that I love more than most, and I think a lot of American fans don't have patience with storylines. So, I mean, going into more of a Japanese style, when if you watch a regular show, for example, and try to keep up, all you're going to see are tag matches, and people are going to wonder, like, why? Why are there so many tag matches? It's because they're building slowly but surely to that huge show that's coming up in 2-3 months, and you're going to see a blow off, but keep in mind there has to be a proper build, a very, very intricate build. So you could maybe see these guys at the soonest would be, if you want to do it one more time, do it in the Best of Super Junior final. I'd say have Ishimori go over, and then Takahashi like make his elevation to the heavyweights. Outside of that, again, these two just tremendous chemistry. I'm really hoping Takahashi's body holds up, and then I'm super curious as to Ishimori, El Phantasmo, that situation. Those two have, I know Phantasmo's a humongous ego. Curious to see if Ishimori has a little bit in him as well from a character standpoint, to see like if there's an alpha in the juniors amongst the Bullet Club and who falls in second line and they look at each other evenly, or what? Who knows?
I'm very curious to see where Hiromu goes after this, because big win, big stage, Duron, but it's also like how many big moments can he have in Super Juniors before it's time to elevate to that next level? Like he's even in injury, like he was the biggest talking point within the junior division, and he just has that enigmatic personality where you just want to know what's gonna happen with him, what's his next move. So like he can only have so many successes and great matches in Super Junior before I'm worried that he kind of turns into like a Kushida story, I guess. Like he turns to a situation where he's just nonstop in the Super Junior division, but Kushida, as he's spoken of in the past, he really wanted to be elevated to that heavyweight division, but that never came and he ended up leaving. I don't want to see that for Romy, but I just hope that if he does have ambitions for heavyweight, or yeah, if he has ambitions for it, then I hope that transition happens sooner rather than later. And if not sooner, then at least sometime down the line. And with that said, with Taiji Ishimori, if he's still just having these great matches, then I hope that this isn't like the end of the road for him in the Super Junior division. And I hope that he himself does big things after this.
It's super easy to transition Takahashi to that heavyweight level, because I believe Lij has two other juniors on their in their stable, and then the evolution of, again, the juniors as a whole. You're gonna have a lot to fall back on, because I don't ever see Ishimori becoming a heavyweight. He's just a little bit too small from a height standpoint. But I mean, you can obviously, maybe you can make him the next big thing. I know he's a little bit older, but he's been around for a long time. But the guy looks 10 years younger than he is, moves extremely well, and has a great character to go along with it.
Honestly, I can kind of see him in a heavyweight type of role. Like I say, he's a little bit on the small side, but he always looks kind of bulkier to me than like the average Super Junior. So I can, if he packed on just a little bit more weight, I can kind of buy him in that role. He's gonna stand out as one of their smaller guys, but I think his I think his style kind of compensates for that. Like he wrestles not so much like a big, but I guess an aggressive low, and I think that might help him go a long way if he ever made that transition.
Absolutely agree. And the thing about Taiji Ishimori is that he looks definitely small when you put him next to guys in the book club like Fale and things like that, but he's not actually that small. I mean, the guy is 165 pounds, 5'4". So yeah, actually, never mind. We're just gonna back that up. He is much smaller than I thought he was. Never mind. I was going in for this big point, and it just all fell apart in front of my eyes. Anyway, so that is actually going to bring us into the final match of Wrestle Kingdom, the blow-off match, the IWGP Heavyweight and Intercontinental Championship match. Kota Ibushi facing off against Jay White, who had won the briefcase for the right to challenge at Wrestle Kingdom off of Kota earlier on in the year. This is everything I wanted the end of night one to be. This runs for almost an hour. It is just a beautiful love letter to professional wrestling and to the Japanese style of professional wrestling. It is the baptism by fire to bring Jay White back in to that pace and that speed of Japanese professional wrestling. Kota comes out on top and retains his titles, which I don't think anyone really saw. I really saw coming. I do think that once Kota won on night one, everyone kind of went, oh, okay, and he's immediately going to drop him to Jay, and he's going to have had his moment and then move on and kind of go off onto his little thing, similar to, who was it? Keith Lee with the NXT title, where he won it and then immediately dropped it. Kind of give him that moment of like, hey, man, you're doing great, and we're moving on to the next hot thing. This was crazy. I think the biggest bit of storytelling that happened in this match actually happened after the match, in that post-match press conference, where Jay White kind of has to confront the fact that he lost and that he wasn't able to get the job done, and he just breaks down into tears. It's one of those things that goes back to that, now that everyone's back in Japan, that power struggle for Bullet Club. I think the thing you do here is you bring Jay away from Bullet Club. You start to transition him out of that like uber heel role. You put him somewhere like a LIJ or a Suzuki-gun, and you give him that, like, you're still a main guy, you're still a front runner guy, or you even like set him off on his own with Carl Fredericks, where Carl Fredericks, has said famously, he's not a faction guy, he's an LA dojo guy. He will fight in New Japan, he will fight in Japan, he will never fight for a faction. You kind of put him in that role of just being one of those free agents just running on his own. It's definitely going to be interesting to see where they go with this character going forward.
I know. I only have a couple of thoughts on this. Jay White is best served as a heel, so whatever role that he moves into, if he does move away from Bullet Club, he needs to stay a heel. You can't take him away from that. I just cannot envision him as a guy that the crowd gets behind, even though he pulled that very very sympathy driven promo after the match, post match, when they interviewed him, just saying like I'm done, I don't have any more, and you actually felt a little bit of pity for him, but that's not a guy I want to feel pity for. He's just so vindictive and just so cunning, ruthless. He's arguably the best heel in the world right now. That being said, the right guy won. I'm really looking forward to hoping that they establish a dominant championship run with Kota. I'd keep it a little bit shorter than Okada's title defense number. I'd maybe keep it around 8 to 9, give it a good year, maybe year and a half before somebody finally takes it from him. But now that he signed that contract, let him run with the ball and see how far he can take it, because we all know, not just the fans in Japan, we know they love him, but there are a lot of people in America that really, really kind of grasp onto him. And I think it's partially because of association with Kenny Omega, but now he can establish a character of his own and just to say, this is me, I run alone, follow me, I am now a god like I claimed I was going to be.
Absolutely. And just before we get Jam's thoughts on the match, I do want to dispute something you said there. You say that he is best served in that company as a heel, and at a point I would have agreed with you. My only counter argument is, a year and a half ago, we all said the same about Bayley being a face. And now that feels like a distant and dark memory of her coming out with those damn inflatable, wacky, waving, arm flailing tube men and being this like, oh, gee, Willikers, I'm so happy to be here. And now she takes herself seriously, and we get to see that shift. I do see where the trepidation comes from of like, well, the face to heel is a much easier jump than heel to face. But I think if you're going to do it, that night, that press conference is a huge first step in the right direction of giving him that just creeping in of self-doubt of like, maybe I'm not as good as I think I am, and allowing him to rebuild himself in an image of, if not positivity, then indifference. No one, he doesn't have to come out and be all smiles and happy and hugging people in the crowd. He can be a John Moxley where he's clearly not a heel, but he's not a face. He's somewhere in between, doing that whole kind of shtick. And he's a good guy when he needs to be. He can be a bad guy when he needs to be. He's not above, cheating for the victory, but he knows that what he's doing now and having the people run in and try to get that victory for him so that he doesn't have to work so hard isn't working anymore.
I actually really like that vision. If it indeed comes to fruition, which now you painted a picture enough to where I think it can happen, I'm going to be the first to shout you out on it. That is well done, Sam. That being said, I'm going to try to stick to my guns on this one and just say that selfishly, I truly hope that Jay White remains just this absolute despicable, hated, just I guess for like an Eric Bischoff term, a chicken shit heel. I want him to remain that. I just think that's his best role. And I'm trying to picture someone in New Japan who's like him, and I don't think I can right now.
Kenta at the start of his run, sort of, but I mean, Kenta immediately like progressed to the go to sleep, like I will choke you out and make you thank me after kind of guy pretty quickly. But yeah, you're right. He is very much the lone guy in that realm. But again, with the pandemic seemingly starting to move towards a realm where we're going to get a lot more cross pollination, and you can bring in these American guys who are graduating from the dojo, and you can bring back these guys that are over on excursion. Now you have the opportunity to bring in Shooter Umino, Ren Narita, Carl Fredericks, all these guys that can fill that role and can fill it well and allow him to kind of explore and expand on that character.
It's tough because I'm still trying to like wrap my head around it because like the Jay White image, the Jay White character is so personified with being that heel character. It's hard for me to see him as a babyface. The last time I even remember him as a babyface, I don't think he's been one since he was in Excursion and Ring of Honor when he had the white tighty whities and was just, I'm just happy to be here, guys. I just want to wrestle. And he's such a far cry from that. It's hard for me to see how he could transition, if not back to that, then to a more sympathetic role. Like maybe I need to see this promo you're talking about because when you first, he's been so tied to this heel character that when you were talking about him crying in the middle of the ring, I immediately thought it was just like a heel type of cry, just like pouting, crying in the middle of the ring because he lost. Like that's what I'm thinking when I think Jay White. So like he's talented enough where he could maybe pull off. And like another thing, like I used to hate Jay White back in the day. Not in the like heel hate. I'm thinking like, yo, this guy's annoying. Get him off my TV. His face annoys me. He like that type of hate. But like he became so good at being a heel that I just couldn't even deny anymore. Like, yo, put him on my TV more often. And I'm not sure if you get that same click if he turns a babyface. Like Sam said earlier, it's easier to go from face to heel than heel to face. It's a long climb, but maybe he can pull off. Maybe he can prove me wrong. Who knows? But like as far as Kota Ibushi retaining, I'm very happy to hear that. Like I know we said that he had a very mad type of match the night before, and his tower win was kind of underwhelming, but I think that the right tower reign could bring people back around. Like Jesse said, give him the tower for 8 to 9 months. I say give him a tower run for at least a year. Like give him a year to just kind of like spread his wings a little bit, so to speak. Give him a year to kind of go through the roster, make people care about him. Because I think, like I said earlier, like the hard thing with the Kota Ibushi characters that you missed out on a lot of potential storylines with Kenny Omega, and when you lose Kenny Omega, you lose a little bit of the character, and if you lose a little bit of that Kota Ibushi character, kind of the fans kind of lost interest in him, it seems like. But if you give him time in the tower role to kind of find something new, find a new character in this championship, and by proxy kind of prove himself by just having 5-star match after 5-star match with maybe a rematch with Jay White, maybe play off the history with Tanahashi, have a match with Tanahashi. And the more he starts having these great matches, building a character from these matches, I think by the time next Wrestle Kingdom runs around, people are going to be invested in Kota Ibushi again. And I think people are going to love him to the point that they'll hate to see him lose the belt, if he even loses the belt. So time will tell there, but it seems like this is the right move all around.
I definitely agree. My last thoughts on the match and I guess the night is, I agree. You give him that title run to the next Wrestle Kingdom, but you play into the fact that he announced during the G1 that he was going to become God. He was going to be this deity of professional wrestling. You let that fuel in. You let that fuel into his ego. You let him build himself up to this conflated no one can touch me. I'm the greatest. You make him the legend killer. You have him retire the Satoshi Kojima's, you have him put Naito and guys of that ilk on the shelf for months and months and months, and then that's when you bring in your Jay White and you start that build of I don't know what I'm doing. I what I've done and what's gotten me all this success hasn't worked. I don't know how it's going to happen. I don't know what's happening. And you rebuild him in the eyes of the audience, and then you bring him back for night 2, Wrestle Kingdom 16, and you have that blow off. You keep them away from each other for a year, but you have that blow off at Wrestle Kingdom 16, and whoever comes out of that victorious comes out of that victorious. I don't want to speculate or predict in that way because that's no fun, but I think that's where you go with this.
Yeah, and I think, I don't know about you two, but I know a lot of people I'm connected with felt that Jay White was going to win the G1 and he was going to walk away from the Tokyo Dome as champion this year. So Gato is always a step ahead of us in some way, shape, or form. So there's the potential that the playback's going to happen. You might have written it for us right there, Sam. Have them stay away from each other for a year. Let's revisit it again. And Jay White's the one that walks out victorious a year later than we anticipated, just saying, ha ha, I'm smarter than you. That being Gato.
Absolutely. But let's get into our final thoughts on the weekend. Jesse, what did you think about the cards as a whole? The 2 days of almost 11 hours of wrestling, getting up at 2 a.m. Worth it? Not worth it? What did you think?
It's always worth it. I feel that the cup of coffee that I had, it was only 4 ounces at about 6 o'clock this evening, was just enough to get me over the edge to get me through the podcast. There's always a lot of excitement when it comes to a Wrestle Kingdom. I don't think it ever disappoints, especially if you've seen one and you know what it's capable of. It is their version of WrestleMania. There's so many directions that all of these characters have. I guess that's the greatest thing about New Japan, is that almost every single guy there has something that we are invested in. And that's something that I feel that if more American fans were to latch onto it, you can go, I can resonate with that person. I can resonate with that person, as opposed to something maybe you don't connect with somebody in a different promotion. You can probably connect with 80 to 90% of the roster on New Japan. And I think that's just kudos and a cadence to Gato and the booking and just how well it's presented. So for those who are on the fence ever going about watching a Wrestle Kingdom, please do so. I feel that once you're drawn in, that you'll never not watch it. You'll always go back to it. It will be tradition, much like something that Sam and I have now done for the last 4 years. It's well worth it. You're gonna lose maybe 4 to 5 days worth of good, consistent sleep, or maybe your life might be thrown off just a hair. But if you're a true wrestling fan, it's worth it.
Absolutely. Jam, any final thoughts?
It just sounds like Wrestle Kingdom was a success again. Like there's always hype around Wrestle Kingdom, as it would be for any weekend's worth of WrestleMania content. And it seems like, from sounds of it, it delivered in a way that you were entertained by the weekend and also just excited for what's the, how do I put this, what the results of Wrestle Kingdom means for New Japan 6 months down the line and 12 months down the line. And anything that wrestling puts out that gets you not only curious but excited for what it means a few months down the line, then that's a success in my book. And I'm glad Wrestle Kingdom could have been that success again.
Absolutely, and I just want to echo both of your sentiments. Wrestle Kingdom is the ultimate lover of pro wrestling show. It's the greatest ode to pro wrestling that is put out every year. If you're a fan from the 80s and 90s and you haven't really kept up, or if you're a fan that only watches Western wrestling, Go out and seek out this show. It is worth the 10.5 hours you're going to put into it. There is not a wasted moment on this card from top to bottom on both nights. It's not like WrestleMania this year where you had your Baron Corbin match in the middle that kind of felt like, oh, okay, this is where you can go and you can take a break and you can, relieve yourself, get a hot dog, whatever you need to do. This is that moment. There is not that moment on a Wrestle Kingdom card. Everything matters and everything is building to something else that they'll be able to call back on 1, 2, 3, 4 years down the line. And it is one of those things where I think the more Western audiences buy in to New Japan as a major product that we take seriously, the more Western companies are going to have to rise to that expectation and change the way they book themselves. You've seen it a little bit in AEW. You've seen it a very, very small amount in Impact and Ring of Honor. The biggest one out there is still doing the 50-50, you'll win today, but you'll lose tomorrow crap. And I think the only way we get that to change and we get it to mature with us as fans is by giving New Japan their due. All right, and that'll actually bring us to the end of our show. So thank you all so much for tuning in. Jesse, do you have any pluggables?
A lot. I'll keep it short. On Twitter, DAJV Show 24. That is my handle. Eventually, I'm going to start writing once again for Daily DDT, as well as we're going to see. I have a couple of other publications. I'm still kind of in the middle of. We're debating. We have WrestleJoy on one side, Wrestle In on the other one. So I know I'm going to be writing for them very soon. Look for those. Outside of that, once again, please follow Daily DDT. We're very excellent writers. A lot of great people that are surrounding it. We have new co-heads that are just, I don't know, everything as a whole. The vibe at Daily DDT has always been very uplifting, and that's something I'm going to always promote.
WrestleJoy is still going? I thought they shuttered.
They are under the radar at the moment, making a small resurgence. They've done a very small rebranding. Okay. We're going to see how it goes. So, yes, they are still there. I wrote for them when it started contributing my podcasts there, which that'll be the last thing I promote, is Wrestling's Unplugged and Undeniable. I've done about 11 episodes, and I'll probably have the two of you guys on at some point, too, to talk shop.
Fantastic. All right. You can follow me on Twitter at Gladen, Sam. You want to spell out comma and read my coverage of all things pro wrestling at dailyddt.com. I'm also over at Sportskeeda. And just go to my Twitter bio, click on the link tree. Everywhere I've ever written will be in there. If there's anywhere else that I write, anywhere else I turn up, it'll be there as well.
And if you like bad tweets, bad pictures, and you can follow me at Wham Bam It's Jam on Instagram and Twitter. That big Eminem poster behind me, it has to do with my new media platform, upliftunited.com. So if you like essays, podcast networks, including this podcast, check that out. I'm now doing social media stuff for New Queer Order, a queer media platform by Felicia Rose and A-Love. You may have heard of Felicia Rose if you're in the wrestling community. They've now got their own platform of podcasts. And you can check that out at newqueerorder.com, New Queer Order on Instagram, at new_queer on Twitter. And I actually spoke with them about their new platform on the latest episode of Mental Health Check-In Podcast. And I think that's everything I need to promote. I listed like 20,000 things, so I hope everyone could keep up.
Fantastic. Don't forget to subscribe to the show on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. Leave us a rating and a review. It really seriously helps us out. I thought for years that people were just saying that to get you to click and engage, but it helps us. It seriously does. You can follow the show on Twitter at LapsedGraps. That's LAPSEDGRAPS. And until next time.
Hey there, me again, Jam again. So, during the recording, I forgot to mention that Uplift United just launched its own Patreon and Ko-fi. So if you want to support the people across the network, then that's subscribing to that or just donating something for Ko-fi would be a really dope way to do so. All right, that's it. Thank you. We out.
We out.
We out.